for joining us. Thank you, Apelele. Apelele started the recording. Welcome and thank you for joining us, colleagues. And good afternoon to all of you, and a very early good morning to Dean, who's joining us from all the way from Canada. And the session this afternoon is, of course, on having a conversation with Dean on FAST, and Dean will explain what that means. We also have an update from Tini, and we will hear from her on some of the findings from the survey on the cataloging code of ethics. And so if you look at the screen at the moment, colleagues, you'll see the program. We will have Tini first, and then we will have Dean, and then we'll have a question and answer session. And if you would, as we go along, if you are so moved, you can pose the question in the chat and Ingrid will pick it up from there. And if you're comfortable during the question and answer session, you can also put your hand up. Ingrid will hopefully see it, and you can put your mic on and your camera and ask your question. And then Mersha will do the thank you and the closures. And at that time, Mersha will also ask you if you're comfortable to put your camera on so that we can take a screenshot. As you know, we will use these as in our newsletters, which I'm sure that you've seen by now. So we are going to start with the program with Tini first. Tini, as you know, is the immediate past chair of IGBIS, and she served on many capacities in LIASA and has been involved specifically with IGBIS. She is currently the, Tini, did we call it the coordinator? Yeah. Of the task, the coordinator of the task team on the cataloging code of ethics as we unpack it in South Africa. And you may recall that we ran a survey during June, and some of the, and Tini will share some of the, give you an update on it and share some little tidbits. Tini, over to you.
Thank you, Fatima. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to start off my few words with thanking the IGBIS chair for inviting always the cataloging ethics task team to join and update our colleagues at events like this. I would also like to thank the IGBIS Exco for supporting the task team with many activities. I'm thinking specifically of Sarah, helping with the questionnaire, and Mersha for the coming round of working through and processing the results. And of course, the whole cataloging ethics task team. We are not a lot of people, so the few of us that are there, we are working really hard. And of course, if there was no colleagues in our profession to work with, all our effort would be not of relevance. So especially regarding the questionnaire, I would like to thank the colleagues for participation in that questionnaire. It is really good to know or to get knowing the professionals, and the questionnaire, such a questionnaire is one way to getting to know you. So as Fatima said, the questionnaire run during June. We had our due date as the 30th of June. And I must apologize if you have hear the sound. There's a course running here, and we do not have brick walls between the various rooms. So please tell me if I must speak a little bit up if you can't hear me. Okay, so we had our first meeting on the 7th of July after the running of the questionnaire. And on this coming Friday, the 14th, we will have a more detailed meeting where the champions, each section of the questionnaire has got a champion, and we are going to organize teams around the champions working through the various sections of the questionnaire. There's a facts part, there's a feeling part, and there's a facts and feeling part. And we have Mersha that's going to be our mentor in analyzing the results. This Friday, we are going to look into the schedule or plan for the processing actions, and also our approaches to discuss the data analysis. By the 11th of August, we plan to have a rough outline of the report, and the report will consist of 3 parts, the section A, B, and C. And during this month, we also try to get the input of the Ethics Institute. So if I can quickly go to the questionnaire itself, I've scanned the data. So it is really a summary and a feeling that I've got when I worked through or read through the data. First of all, section A dealt with the demographics. And we are a learned group of people. We are diverse in this group. We perform the normal professional activities. The game that we are playing in is describing resources and everything that's having to do with that. But we are also involved in other activities like instruction management, auxiliary physical processing, and short record creation. We support in other areas of the profession. We are dealing with systems administration, product development, and so on. Our group consists of managers, specialists, professionals, assistants. We have full-time and part-time professionals. We have professionals with traditional and conventional naming conventions. And our neighboring professions like archives and museums, knowledge managers, and digitization positions also included in this questionnaire. Section B, I must tell you that overwhelmingly the university libraries respond to this questionnaire, but there were also special libraries, public libraries, government libraries, the National Library, private libraries that responded, as well as our neighboring professions. Section B covers the statements and some comments. I'm not going to go into each of the statements. We have 4 statements that the professionals agreed strongly about with the international statements, and this was the first one. We are cataloging for the end user and for access and discovery. The second one was to describe without prejudice and with respect to others. We take responsibility for our cataloging decisions and be transparent in practices and our policies. And we collaborate wildly and widely about metadata and its status in various environments and jurisdictions. Some comments regarding agreement about the statements were about that it will contribute to inclusiveness and that they are definitely achievable. And we also asked about, are there any changes or things to add regarding the statements, and comments that I noticed dealt with leadership and coordination levels need to improve. We need to promote the professional status of catalogers. Training was mentioned, and we need to take care and take note of it, that in South Africa, we are an incredibly diverse professional group. Section C dealt with cataloging ethics experiences. This is now the feeling part of the questionnaire. I am going to summarize what I saw there. Generally, the professionals didn't experience any discomfort regarding records. And if there was discomfort, it had to do with quality, not with really with ethical issues and so on. When it comes to ethical issues, the language and terminology was mentioned. And mention was also made that the professionals get their guidance from the international standards, their own catalogers' judgment, discussions amongst each other, and training about these issues. Regarding standards, the normal standards are applicable, but I've noticed that many institutions use together, for example, with the Library of Congress subject headings, specialized subject vocabularies. And there's also institutions that's using the Mark 65 650 tag to include, say, let's call it their local terminology. And also make use of open access, and I think it might refer to things like institutional repositories and so on, where they use their own terminology to describe things. Apart from Dewey, we also have users of UDC, and apart from Mark, there are libraries that's using Dublin Core, and apart from ISBD, we have the archival international standard, also applicable. Regarding the South African representativeness, on the official or the international level, our representation is not so strong. But I can guarantee you that there's a feeling that South Africa has the potential in the caliber of professionals and in the subject content specifically to serve on that international bodies. When it comes to internal and external policy alignment, there is a strong adherence to international standards, but also to valid internal in-house standards. And there's a great support for inclusivity. Nearly 50% of the responses indicated always for to support inclusive wording in our record creation. So with this brief summary, I would say that I have a positive feeling about this questionnaire, and that we can be proud of as catalogers, as a professional group. We know the game that we are playing, and we apply our catalogers' judgment and our social skills to guide us in unfamiliar areas. We value our own to the extent of international promotion. So I would say that regarding this questionnaire and the responses that I've got, that our profession matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Tini. I hope we remain wild. Thank you, Tini. That was very, that was some very nice tidbits and insights. So we're looking forward to the full report. Colleagues, if you have questions for Tini, she will remain until the end of the session. So she will be here for the questions and answer sessions. And if you also want to pose or comment in the chat, Ingrid will also pick it up from there. So this afternoon session is on, as I've said already, fast, faceted application of because that's how I would say it in my home mother tongue. Dean is the head of collection management services at the University of Victoria Libraries in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. He's worked for over 15 years in cataloging and digital collections metadata. He has used fast Flix, can you hear me? My colleagues have indicated that I have lost the connection. Can somebody confirm whether you can still hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Where did I lose you?
When you were doing the introduction.
Introductions. Okay, I'll start again. Dean Seaman is that correct? Is that where I left you? He's head of collection management services at the University of Victoria Libraries in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. He's worked for over 15 years in cataloging and digital collections metadata. He has used FAST extensively in his metadata work. He's currently the co-chair of the FAST Policy and Outreach Committee. You know, we like our abbreviations, so it's abbreviated to FPOC. Members of the PCC, the Program for Cooperative Cataloging Policy Committee, and the FPOC, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, liaison to the PCC Policy Committee. And he is also an author of the co-author of the FAST Quick Start Guide and has written and presented widely on FAST. So I hope that this will maybe be a first presentation, Dean, on further presentations in South Africa. Over to you, Dean.
All right, thanks very much. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, just going to share my screen here. And hopefully everyone can see that. Just a sec here. Go.
We can see your screen.
All right.
And we can see it in presentation mode now.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Right. So yeah, thanks for the invitation. And yeah, I'm here to talk about FAST. It's pretty early in the morning here in Victoria, BC, Canada on the West Coast. But thankfully FAST is kind of an adrenaline producing topic. So it's good to be here to talk to you about it. So my name is Dean Seaman, and I'm head of collection management services here at University of Victoria Libraries and also co-chair of the FAST Policy and Outreach Committee. So today I'm going to talk about FAST. I'm going to start off just by talking about what FAST is, and then I'm going to talk about the component vocabularies of FAST. And then I'm going to kind of dive into some more kind of practical considerations about how you actually use FAST and how you can get started, and some of the tools that are available if you want to use FAST as a vocabulary. I'm going to be saying FAST a lot today. So anyway, that's all right. That's good. And then I'm going to talk about how we're using FAST at University of Victoria Libraries locally. And then we'll have time for questions at the end, and you can just pop them into chat at any time, I think. And I'm happy to answer anything that I can. So before we get started, so this is where I'm coming to you from this morning. It's this little kind of starred area on the west coast of Canada, kind of dips down into kind of below the 49th parallel into the United States. So that's where I am this morning. And this is the campus that I work. And these are a few pictures from February, a couple of years back. And so I do want to acknowledge that the campus and really where I live, which is quite close to the university campus, is quite close to campus, but it's on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, and who still have relationship to the land to this day. These are a few snapshots that I took in February, which is our winter a couple of years ago, and this is good for a Canadian winter in terms of weather. It gets really wet, and there's this guy who's I had to take a picture of it, but who's just kind of basking in the sun after a few long weeks of winter rain, and it kind of represents. I always like that picture. It kind of represents how much gratitude I feel, honestly, being on these lands and as an uninvited guest. And also, there's a feeling of kind of gratitude of being on this land, and also a corresponding feeling of responsibility as well. So let's talk about FAST. And what I'm going to talk about today, and during the introduction, there was mentioned that there is this FAST quick start guide. So I'm just going to start off by saying that a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is also in this FAST quick start guide, but it goes into a little bit more detail in some areas. But here's the link, and here's what the quick start guide is. And it's meant to kind of give a general introduction and really a lot of kind of basic information around how FAST works and all the different vocabularies work. So I'm going to talk about a lot of things that are talked about in the FAST quick start guide, and then I'm going to diverge from it in certain areas as well. So what is FAST? FAST is the faceted application of subject terminology. It's a faceted subject vocabulary. It's mostly derived from Library of Congress subject headings, LCSH, and other Library of Congress vocabularies like the Library of Congress name authority file. It began in 1998 as a collaboration of OCLC Research and the Library of Congress. And it was a few years ago that it became kind of moved from kind of this experimental vocabulary that had been used kind of, I don't know, a little bit widely, but not too widely, I would say, and it became a fully supported vocabulary of OCLC. So it is derived from Library of Congress subject headings, and as such, it is kind of a general use as opposed to something that's a vocabulary that's more kind of disciplinary or focused on a particular area. FAST is meant to be kind of a general purpose and general use subject terminology scheme. It's meant to be simple to learn and apply, and well, you'll be the judge of that, but I'll talk about how I think that's the case at least. It's also faceted navigation friendly, and it maintains upward compatibility with LCSH. So since it is derived from LCSH, it uses a lot of the same terms and a lot of the same terminology, and so it's also compatible with that Library of Congress subject heading data. FAST is really maintained and hosted by OCLC, but there is some direction given to it from by the FAST Policy and Outreach Committee. And yes, we do love our acronyms. I always call it FPOC. I think other people do too. So I don't know why it's pronounced, why that's the way to refer to it as opposed to FPOC. But anyway, yes, so this is who FPOC is at the moment. So we do have most of the representation, I'd say, at the moment is from the United States and Canada, but we do have representatives. Alan Danskin from the British Library has just stepped off because he retired, but he was chair for a few years. And Lucy Kilpatrick from Bibliographic Data Services is from Scotland. And yeah, so we do have international representation. And this is the group. There's a call that goes out every year. So if you're interested on serving on FPOC, usually in December, there'll be a call that goes out in the OCLC listservs usually. So if anyone's interested in joining, please put your name forward. All right, so where is FAST and how do I access it? I'm going to go into Search FAST a little bit later in more detail, but Search FAST is, this is kind of where you would enter the vocabulary if you want to use it. Here's the URL for it, and there's just kind of, you start just typing in these search terms, and this is the site where you actually get at the vocabulary. So kind of returning to what is FAST a little bit, it's really not just a single vocabulary. It's 9 different vocabularies. And so you can, there are 9 modular vocabularies. They kind of complement each other in particular ways. And they're really designed to support that faceted retrieval. And I'll talk about what that is in just a second. So you can use any of these vocabularies. You can use all of them if you want to. If you just decide you want to use the geographic one, or just decide you want to use the personal names one, you can feel free to just kind of take any one of these that you want, any one of these 9 vocabularies, or you can decide that you want to use them all. It aligns with LCSH to varying degrees, and I'll talk about how it kind of splits off or diverges from LCSH. And it also relies on the LCSH editorial process. And so something to know about FAST is that really there aren't kind of a team of editors that talks about what terms should be added. So we're going to talk about how to contribute to FAST, and really that pathway to contribution goes through the Library of Congress mechanisms and PCC mechanisms. So it's going to be through SACO for subject headings, and it's going to be NACO for name authorities. And again, there's more acronyms, and I'm happy to explain those at the end if people have questions about them. And so, yeah, so it kind of is this derivative vocabulary that kind of relies on this editorial process that exists within the Library of Congress kind of standards and vocabulary world. So there are 9 modular vocabularies: topical, personal names, corporate names, meetings, named events, uniform titles, chronological headings, geographic headings, and form genre. And I'm going to kind of break these down in turn during this presentation as well. So what do we mean by faceted vocabulary? And I think most people are kind of aware of what that means, but it's really just headings broken down into succinct and discrete parts. So as opposed to trying to kind of jam them all together into a single subject heading where you're adding all of these free-floating subdivisions and you're kind of building out your heading to hopefully represent the semantic meaning of the resource that you're trying to catalog or describe. And so this kind of splits them out to make sure that it's quite discrete and quite succinct. And so, so topical headings are just topical, geographic are split out into their own headings, chronological into their own genre, etc. So it's kind of what faceted vocabulary means. There's this expectation of post-coordination as opposed to pre-coordination with faceted headings. And pre-coordinated is the way that we currently do it with a lot of our Library of Congress subject headings, where again, you're kind of building your heading. You're trying to create that semantic meaning with your heading by adding those free-floating subdivisions to your heading to really get at the content and the meaning of the resource that you're cataloging, but you're kind of building that out. You're pre-coordinating that for users to use. Post-coordination is something that's a little bit different, and that is you're kind of making them shorter and more discrete, those subject headings, and you're relying on the user to actually kind of build it themselves. So they're going to coordinate it on their side. So your kind of application of faceted vocabulary is a little bit simpler usually. And again, you're depending on the user to actually kind of do a keyword search, and then they'll kind of facet and filter after that by ticking on all these different kind of building blocks that you're providing for them within the headings that you create. So if we take a look at an example, so pre-coordinated, we have kind of a typical Library of Congress subject heading. We've got railroads in British Columbia, 19th century history. And again, these are all different types of headings. So we have geographic mixed with chronological, mixed with topical, and those are all consist of the same heading. That faceted or post-coordinated approach is kind of splitting that out into multiple headings. So you're going to put each of the topical terms in their own, and then you're going to put the geographic in its own heading and the chronological in its own heading as well. And again, let the user combine them. So let's get started kind of breaking down each of these vocabularies. I'm going to probably go through this fairly quickly, but I do want to make sure that I go through each of these 9 vocabularies and how they're created. So I'm going to start with topical. It's the most used, I would say, of the vocabularies within FAST. And again, it uses those LCSH terms directly. So it kind of just takes those LCSH terms, it kind of imports them into FAST, and it just uses those as the headings. So they are derived from LCSH topical terms, so Mark 21,650 subfield A, and general subdivisions, subfield X. And again, we're going to kind of hammer this home that LCSH is that pre-coordinated vocabulary, and FAST topical headings are post-coordinated. So yeah, LCSH allows for combining of subdivisions from different facets when formulating headings, while the FAST topical headings are limited to main terms and subdivisions that are topical in nature. So I want to make a distinction here too, and I don't really want to muddle things too much, but I do want to make sure that I say that, FAST is not a pure faceted vocabulary. I think what you would expect from a pure faceted vocabulary is every term. You'd have like a first order term, and that would be together. And then you kind of like, if you wanted to add another term, you would add another heading for that term. But that's not quite what we have in FAST. So it's a little bit of a hybrid system. So it kind of takes in these headings from LCSH. And if LCSH within the vocabulary, if they've already pre-coordinated kind of a section, so a good example to look at is English language etymology. If you go to LCSH, that's kind of pre-coordinated in the heading. It's not building it with free-floating subdivisions or anything. So it's kind of building it as a heading. And so that so FAST just kind of takes that in as is. And so what you might want to do is, if you wanted a true faceted system, you might want to have English language on one line and etymology on another. But in the case of FAST, it just kind of takes that in if it's already been pre-coordinated in LCSH. And yeah, the general rule is if the topical heading and its topical subdivision are pre-coordinated in LCSH, it'll be incorporated into FAST in the same way. So again, it's not that kind of pure faceted system that we might expect. And here's what it looks like within Search FAST. So I did a search for steamboats, and I end up with a topical term. And you're kind of left with this record that you can take a look at. There's some used for and see also headings. There's also links out to other vocabularies like Wikipedia and Wikidata, and of course the Library of Congress subject heading record. You can also view the mark if you want, and we'll take a look at that. And so you can see what the mark looks like, and this is the authority record for the FAST heading. And then up at the top, this is just a bit of, if you just kind of want to use this heading within your bibliographic record, you can just copy and paste that value and bring it right into your system. The next vocabulary in FAST I want to talk about is personal names. So these are identical terms as the Library of Congress name authority file. So it kind of, again, derives it from there. It is not comprehensive though. So it's a bit of a subset of what is in the Library of Congress name authority file. So what OCLC has done is they've kind of created this vocabulary is they've analyzed all of the personal names that have been used as subjects since FAST is a faceted subject terminology. So if it's been used as a subject, like in a Mark 600 bibliographic field within WorldCat, then it's added that name to the FAST vocabulary. And I'll talk a little bit later about how you can add, if there aren't any names, or if it's in the LC authority file, but it's not in FAST, how you can actually add it. Corporate names, it's the exact same thing, except there's analysis that's done. So any Library of Congress name authority file heading that exists within a Mark 610 within WorldCat, that's brought into the FAST vocabulary as a corporate name. Meetings is a little bit different. So again, they're derived from headings established as meeting names in LCANF and have been used as a subject in WorldCat. And yeah, it's quite similar to the meeting names category in the Library of Congress name authority file. And this is what it looks like if you're interested in seeing kind of what these meetings looks like. And you can see, so the ALTA conference and it's listed as a meeting facet. And so again, this is kind of like one interface that's giving you all the different vocabularies and the different possibilities there. And again, if you want to kind of use that heading within your Mark bibliographic record, you can just copy and paste that. Named events, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting in terms of FAST diverging from the Library of Congress family of vocabularies. So named events are events associated with a particular date and possibly a particular geographic location and are well known by a recognized name. So these typically include military events, wars, battles, revolutions, natural disasters, earthquakes, eruptions, and hurricanes, and other notable events such as trials, airplane accidents, strikes, and demonstrations. So yeah, really kind of a disaster focused, it seems, and kind of horrible event focused vocabulary. But yeah, that's kind of what it ends up being, I think, in the end. There is no equivalent category in LCSH. And so this is where things diverge a little bit within FAST. So these are derived from LCSH topical headings, maybe chronological subheadings and geographic headings. And LCSH doesn't really have an equivalent category as named event. And there's a little bit of inconsistency within LCSH. So you don't know sometimes where this thing or this event that you want to describe and you want to include in your descriptive record, you don't necessarily know where it is going to be. And sometimes it's going to be in LCSH, sometimes it might be in the Library of Congress name authority file. So the named event is meant to like bring them all into one vocabulary and make them very easy to find in search. And an example of that kind of unevenness, I guess, within LCSH is the American Civil War is a war, but it's under the geographic heading within kind of the LC family of vocabularies. But World War II is an LCSH topical main heading. So you can kind of see like they're both wars, but one is under the geographic and one is under the one is a topical heading within LCSH. So named events is kind of meant to kind of deal with this issue to say, yes, we'll just give you one place to look for all of these named events. And here's kind of where it is, how it looks in action. So we're looking at the FAST record and authority record kind of in the background there for the American Civil War. And again, that's the type of facet is event. So this is a named event. And then we take a look at how that is in LCSH, and it's under the geographic United States history Civil War. So again, it's just a little bit of a different approach within FAST. Uniform titles is another area where FAST diverges a little bit. So they have to be established within WorldCat and used within WorldCat to be added to FAST. And they are constructed either from the uniform titles headings in the Library of Congress name authority file, or from the title subdivision in personal name or corporate name headings and qualified by the author. So titles here, again, we see like a little bit of disparity within the Library of Congress name authority file, which is the source for this, between the personal name category and the uniform titles. And if you're looking for a title, sometimes you don't know where it's going to be. Sometimes it will be under kind of a corporate name or a personal name, and sometimes it will be under strictly under the title, under uniform titles. And so the uniform titles vocabulary within FAST is kind of meant to bring these all together. And if we take a look at an example, the Library of Congress name title heading for Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut is a name title type of heading. And then within FAST, that title is kind of brought over to the left-hand side. And then there's a parenthetical qualification for Kurt Vonnegut after that. So that's how it's constructed. Chronological is something that is used within bibliographic records, but there aren't many authority records for this within the FAST environment. So if you're within Search FAST, there's not much point in trying to find these. Because it's really just a beginning and an end date. And we'll see an example in a second that I think will illustrate this quite well. So they're not going to create authority records because there's really so many different combinations you could have of beginning date and end date. So that's what chronological headings are for FAST. But there are a few authority records that you'll find within FAST, and you can limit those to period is kind of like the type that you'll see within Search FAST that are there to fulfill a structural need. But chronological is, as you'd expect, kind of the time span that you're that you're describing. And so that's what those chronological headings are. And so if we take a look, this is an example from WorldCat of a chronological fast heading applied. So we see our title, we see art since 1900. In the 650 field, we have a couple of different subject headings, one for art modern 20th century, one for art modern 21st century. And so programmatically, OCLC is going into WorldCat and it's making changes to the records, and it's adding these fast headings. And in this case, it's saying, okay, well, this is the time span that this represents, as opposed to doing those century designations. It's saying, okay, it's from 1900 to 2099. That's kind of the chronological span that we're talking about here. So that's usually how these chronological headings for fast work. Sometimes you will find kind of those authority records, like I said, but in this case, we see that there is a heading, period heading or chronological heading for 1931 to 1939. And I think that this exists within FAST as an authority record, because really it's there because it wants to direct you from one of these more topical terms. So something like a Dust Bowl era. It wants to direct you from that kind of more, I guess, textual representation to using that time span instead. So that's kind of why they exist within the FAST authority environment. Fast geographics, this is something we use quite extensively locally. And this is, they might be continents, countries, populated places, or geographic features. Again, it diverges quite a bit from LCSH in this case and Library of Congress Name Authority file. So it follows more of a hierarchical structure based on the MARC code list for geographic areas. So the headings contain from 1 to 3 levels. The first level being the largest geographic designation identified in that geographic area code list. And so if we look at South Africa, we could have a few different fast headings. We could have South Africa as a first level. We could have Johannesburg as the second level. And again, it's going to be starting with a larger jurisdiction, and then you're going to have a smaller jurisdiction next to it. So it's kind of like goes from larger to smaller. And then we have South Africa, Johannesburg, Alexandra as a third level. And again, LCN NAF that handles these types of geographic headings quite differently. Again, you have that parenthetical qualifier after the city name or after the, I guess, the part of the city, and then again qualified by, okay, well, here's the city that it's in, and here's also the country that it's in. And so I don't know, I really like this fast approach. I've been using it for a long time just because I do like, especially in a faceted environment, I do like that kind of left justified. If you're picking from a list of countries, it kind of puts like with like alphabetically a lot more reliably than having, you know, two things from South Africa and from Johannesburg indeed filed completely separately within an alphabetical list if you're using some kind of post-search facet or filter. So here's this chart is from the Fast Quick Start Guide. And so just kind of lays out some of the main differences between FAST and LCSH for geographic headings. So within FAST, those geographic names are in natural order, and those are sometimes inverted within LCSH, and Mount Fuji is a good example. And again, we see within FAST that larger jurisdiction followed by a geographical feature, natural feature, or a city name or whatever it happens to be. It's always going from larger to smaller. Geographic names are not abbreviated within FAST, and we see this kind of applied inconsistently within Library of Congress kind of family of vocabularies, where we have for Burbank, for example, we have California, Burbank, Los Angeles County qualified there in that case. And then if we look at Burbank, the way LCSH does it, and we do see that abbreviation for Caliph. And so same kind of thing with the River Tyne in England. It is England River Tyne as opposed to Tyne, comma river, and then in parentheses England. So you can kind of see how this kind of like progresses from larger to smaller with a lot of these fast geographics. And the last vocabulary I'm going to talk about, and well, the last vocabulary there is, I can't believe this is the 9th I've gone through, is the fast form genre headings. They're constructed from LCGFT, the Library of Congress genre form terms, and from form subdivisions in LCSH. They're really used to represent what the resource is, not what the resource is about. So that's what those, of course, what those form and genre headings are. So it's really taking kind of mostly LCGFT headings, I would say, and kind of deriving those headings and including it within the FAST form genre headings. But it also includes headings that aren't in LCGFT that are taken from those form subdivisions within LCSH. Yeah, so it's a little bit more inclusive, I would say, than LCGFT. And just an example of that. So most of the time, it's going to agree completely with LCGFT. But for something like, you know, if you see these form subdivisions within LCSH, and we'll use the term the form subdivision catalogs and collections within LCSH, you can apply that, and that appears in FAST, but it's not within LCGFT. So yeah, so that's form genre, and you can just go ahead and use it. So those are the 9 vocabularies. I hope everyone's still with me. Now I want to talk a little bit about kind of how you interact with the vocabulary, what kind of tools there are to kind of keep them up to date. And so, yeah, so that'll be kind of what I talk about in this next section. So search fast, I've already talked about. So yeah, it gives you that nice kind of keyword search to start with. It does have a autocomplete or auto-suggest kind of feature. So as you start to type within FAST, it's going to start to give you possibilities of terms. If you see a bolded term, that means that that's a preferred term, and the non-bolded are the non-preferred terms. So either way, you're going to get to the right record, but you can just like see very quickly as you start to type which are the preferred terms, and you can just kind of, it's very quick to see what term you should actually apply. Of course, we've already taken a look at kind of what these records look like within FAST. There is the facet given there. And so for all these different headings, because you know all of these headings are showing up, all the different types and all the different vocabularies are showing up within Search Fast altogether. You can filter them though. So if you have a term that you definitely want within geographic as opposed to corporate name, let's say, then you can actually filter to just the geographics. And again, you're kind of brought to those, if you decide to do that, then you're kind of brought to that authority record. You can view the mark. There's like a simple view. You can do all kinds of things. You can view the Mark 21 or the RDF. You can view all kinds of things from there. Fast Converter. So this is another tool that has been created by OCLC, and really it kind of answers the question of, all right, well, I've got a bunch of, I think a lot of library catalogs have a lot of Library of Congress subject headings in them, but actually I'd like to convert a bunch of them over to FAST, or even a single heading from one to another, from LCSH to FAST. So this comes in handy really if you want to do those one by one things. So you can just kind of put that heading on the left hand side. You can copy and paste up to 20 headings in that box, and you click on convert and it'll give you all of the FAST headings there. You can also upload a file, so you can do up to 500 records within a file, where you can give it a bunch of headings, and then you can press on convert and it'll give you a file back with all of the associated FAST headings, having converted it from the Library of Congress vocabularies. FAST is linked data. It's available as linked data. So there's a little bit of a different interface for the FAST linked data service. But of course, it does give you that kind of that currency that is required for linked data, that URI. And so I'll go into how we apply these URIs. We do use FAST as linked data here at University of Victoria Libraries. But yeah, it does give you that URI, and yeah, so it's kind of forward-thinking vocabulary. This has been available for quite a while, and yeah, so it's wonderful to see. And import fast, we're going to return to that question that we had with the personal names and the corporate names, and also with topical headings, in that what do you do if you know that a heading, a personal heading that you'd like to use as a subject within the FAST vocabulary? What if it's, it's in the Library of Congress name authority file, but you don't know but it's not appearing in FAST. And in that case, you would use import FAST. You just go to this tool, you click on personal name, let's say, you put in that Library of Congress control number for the authority, for the personal name authority, and you could import it. And what that's going to do is put that on a big list of things that OCLC is going to import from LCA NAF into FAST. It'll give you a FAST identifier right away. It usually takes, in my experience, about a month for it to actually appear in the FAST vocabulary. But again, there's kind of this manual process where you can kind of add personal names and corporate names, or if you feel like a topical heading is missing from LCSH, you can also request that that be added as well. Yeah, so that's how you add it. Now, if there is a topical heading that you're not seeing in FAST, and also if you go to LCSH and you're not seeing it there either, there is again, this is where we go back to the editorial process of what gets included in FAST, and using kind of these Library of Congress and the PCC, or Program for Cooperative Cataloging, you're seeing a lot of these structures being relied upon. So there is a funnel, a SACO funnel for subject headings, so that you can put for FAST users, if they would like a term to be added to LCSH, because that's really the way to get it into FAST. So if they would like that term to be added, you can email the co-coordinators of the SACO funnel, the FAST funnel. Alan is now retired, so I think Janet is probably the best person to contact at this point. So it kind of would put it for consideration to the people who are members of that funnel, and then if they agree with it, they would kind of put it into Library of Congress through the normal kind of subject heading submission process. And then hopefully it ends up in LCSH, and then it'll end up in FAST shortly after. So this chart kind of outlines kind of how we can contribute to FAST. And again, those topical headings, import FAST if it's in LCSH and not in FAST, which should be rare because it should be fairly kind of aligned pretty closely. FAST is updated pretty frequently from LCSH, so that shouldn't be the case too much. But there is that SACO funnel if it's not an LCSH and you'd like to see a term changed, or you'd like to see a new term within LCSH and FAST. Personal names, yes, you can use that import FAST. And what we do, we're part of a NACO funnel, NACO Canada funnel. And so we do have people on our catalogers who submit authority records for us, particularly people who are of local importance that aren't in the Library of Congress name authority file. And that's really the way. So you'd want to create that authority, get it into the LC name authority file. And then after that, it shows up, or you can import it into FAST directly. And that's the same with corporate names. For meetings and uniform titles, you just email fast@oclc.org with the LC control number, and they will do their best to get that into FAST. Named events and chronological are kind of just these automated processes that happen by OCLC. So there's nothing really to request there. And so that's kind of like these a little bit more of a mechanical kind of heading creation process. And geographic and form genre as of right now, it's not possible to submit directly to those, but who knows, maybe in the future that will be possible as well. So you end up with all these, let's say you do start to use FAST and you end up with all of these FAST headings in your catalog. And of course, as we all know with our authority records, why we have them and load them is because those headings change over time and relationships change. And, we add a death date to a personal name heading and that kind of thing. And so, so there is a facility to actually kind of keep up with all the changes to the FAST authority file. You can download the authority records. They post this pretty frequently, I'd say. So you can download all of the FAST authority records, and also it's available as a CSV as well. And we use the CSV file here for our digital collections and making sure that our FAST headings keep up to date. There's also an API you can use, so you can kind of programmatically go into FAST and use the headings and search them and everything else. And yeah, so I think that's it in terms of, kind of some of the practicalities and some of the tools that are available for FAST. All right, so I wanted to talk about why fast, and really, I think a lot of this has been written about before. And so what we usually hear with why people have adopted fast, or why you'd want to go ahead and start using it, is, and I think the main thing is that it's efficient and intuitive. And so you saw what the search fast interface looks like. To my mind, that's a superior kind of search interface for people to kind of get up and started with trying to assign subject headings, as opposed to something like LCSH, which you're kind of greeted with it, and then you're not sure exactly how to interpret all the rules necessarily. It takes quite a bit of training and time to actually use LCSH properly and understand how to apply all of those subdivisions. And it's not quite the same with FAST. You can kind of do more headings more quickly with less training involved. The fact that it aligns with LCSH, I think, is another selling point, and one reason that I've kind of advocated for it to remain as kind of a derivative vocabulary, because this topic does come up occasionally, to say, can we just add terms directly to FAST as opposed to adding it to LCSH and then pulling it from LCSH after that? And I think, there is the possibility of that happening, of adding terms directly to FAST. But once you do that, all of those terms are, of course, kind of entangled in this web of, relationships and semantic meaning within the entire subject heading system. So just adding it cold, all these new terms into FAST, is not something I'm personally in favor of, but anyway, it might happen anyway. So anyway, the fact that it aligns with LCSH is good in my mind, because a lot of our records do use LCSH. And so that common vocabulary across using FAST and then LCSH for a lot of these types of headings is a positive. It can be automatically generated. We saw a FAST converter. There's also an OpenRefine extension. I've been kind of lobbying to get a kind of a more supported reconciliation service to use within OpenRefine to apply FAST. There is also the API, which I talked about, and in MarcEdit as well, you can add a bunch of FAST headings for records as well. It's free. There's no subscription cost. You can just go into Search Fast and start using those vocabularies. It's flexible, so it's not only good for library cataloging and MARC 21 environments, it's also good in digital collections or digital humanities projects, and really all kinds of different environments. It's available as linked data. Indeed, it's more suited to linked data. So there's this problem of minting URIs in a pre-coordinated system. So if you're kind of using LCSH and kind of building all these subdivisions and these free-floating subdivisions, and you're kind of building your heading out, it's a lot more suited. It's really hard to mint URIs for every combination of those headings as they're built. And so having something more discrete, and every term within FAST comes with its own URI, is necessary for things like BibFrame and other kind of linked data cataloging standards as we move forward. It aligns with user expectations. So again, when I go to a website, it doesn't matter, it's e-commerce, if it's kind of a library site, I'm going into there, I'm usually putting in a keyword search, and then I want to use those categories to filter by. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of feeding more into what users expect when they go to an online database nowadays. One-stop shop, that's another big one, and that's kind of why we use it locally, at least, is I don't have to go to a different vocabulary for personal names, and a different one for geographics, and a different one for topical headings, and a different one for genre headings. So I can just use this one vocabulary, this one interface to actually go to use for all of my subject cataloging. Why not FAST? We did a survey a little while back just to look at the FAST Policy and Outreach Committee, just to see why people aren't using FAST and some of the obstacles there. And a lot of it comes down to, well, I don't know, we haven't made the decision that we're going to use FAST. And so it's really just replicating a lot of that data, the data that's in LCSH. So it's a lot of clutter, lack of expression and specificity for sure, in that, yeah, with a pre-coordinated approach and the Library of Congress approach, you can get very specific in your subject heading. And really, the idea is to get as specific as you can as the resource requires it. So you are kind of suffering from that lack of expression and specificity within within a faceted environment and fast in that you're kind of like just creating these building blocks for the user to put together, but you're not kind of putting those building blocks together for them. So it gives you kind of cuts off your the amount you can be specific and how you can express that heading. And it doesn't include everything. So we've gone through import fast and personal names and kind of what subset is available within fast, but it's not kind of comprehensive and it's not fully inclusive of that Library of Congress name authority file. I should say that there has just been kind of a slew of articles that came out around faceted vocabularies and FAST with Catalog and Classification Quarterly. And so if you're interested in kind of what we're doing at University of Victoria Libraries, we have an article in there, and also a few members of the FAST Policy and Outreach Committee, we wrote an article about how we each individually use FAST. And so, so it's worth checking out. There's some other great articles on there too, just kind of thinking about kind of faceted vocabularies in general, and a lot of these would also touch on FAST. Right, so I'm going to talk quickly now, just to make sure I leave enough time for questions and everything at just how we use FAST at University of Victoria Libraries. And I'm going to mostly center, we use it in various systems and platforms here, but I'm going to center it on how we use it in our digital collections platform, which we call Vault. And there's the URL if anyone wants to go and take a look. So this is mostly digitized content from our local archive special collections, but also community partners, and also research partners as well. And so I'm going to go back to kind of why we use FAST. It's easy to apply. Again, all of those vocabularies are together, and I can just point people to it and say, great, just use FAST for all of these, as opposed to saying, okay, well, use the Library of Congress name authority file, go to the Library of Congress subject headings and class web for topical headings. So I'm not telling them to do any of that. I'm just kind of driving them all to this single interface. The fact that it's intuitive, and I don't want to kind of belabor this point, is also a big selling point for us, and especially with a lot of the digital collections and projects work that we do. It's a lot of people coming in, maybe people working on a project and maybe helping out with the metadata for that project for a short amount of time, maybe 3 months or 6 months, and that's nowhere near enough time to actually train somebody fully in Library of Congress subject heading application, but we still have the need for some kind of standardized vocabulary to use. And so DH projects, digital humanity projects, grant funded projects, class projects, all that kind of thing FAST is kind of a nice vocabulary for those people, because they can just kind of dive right in and start using FAST for that. Also, that agreement with the Library of Congress, that matters for us. So we don't actually use FAST. We kind of, our current policy at the moment is to retain FAST headings, but not to replace FAST within our catalog yet. I think eventually we're going to get there, but not at the moment. And so that kind of agreement with the Library of Congress is important. So yes, in our digital collections and in Vault, we're going to use the FAST heading, but in the catalog, we're going to use the LC heading, and then we also use FAST. We've added a lot of headings to our archival management system and use FAST in that one as well. So we still want all of these to align, and really all of these are kind of like harvested and kind of like presented in our big discovery layer that we have. And so we want all these headings to be as alike as possible across all these different platforms. And so that consistency with LCSH and the Library of Congress name authority file is important to us. So we assign URIs. I'm not going to talk about this too much, but just to say that, yes, we do assign these FAST URIs within our heading as well. Just because we can, because we have a system that allows for linked data entry, but also for increased precision and specificity while entering these values, which is something else. Again, that URI kind of buys you a lot, I think, in terms of your data long-term, in that if we ever decide to move to another vocabulary, let's say I want to move from FAST from my personal names into the Library of Congress name authority files, all of those things are kind of, since I've applied that URI, that link to the LC authority record is present. So I could just kind of do a swap and replace a lot of those if I wanted to. It just kind of opens up your data to the world in a different way, as opposed to just using textual fields. Also argue again that it's more the kind of like aligning with user expectations. So it's a more effective way to interface with our metadata and our digital collections in particular. So have that genre separated out, have a geographic location separated out. So all these different kind of discrete things can be mixed and matched. And again, that user expectation of, yes, they're probably going to start with a keyword search, and then there's probably going to be some post-search filtering on facets. And that's kind of a more expected online behavior. Something that we try to achieve, I think, within Vault is at the very least, and hopefully that kind of is going to be contagious throughout our metadata approach across all of our systems, is this idea of robust simplicity. And I think what we get with a lot of those pre-coordinated big long LCSH subject strings is, yes, I've been quite specific, and one cataloger has spent a lot of time combining all those headings to create meaning, and I don't want to disparage that process, and I think it's a wonderful process. I really like it, actually, but I think it provides gives us a lot of inconsistency in the end. And so I think the simpler you make that process, I think the more robust your headings are going to be overall. So it's going to be more headings reliably applied, as opposed to these kind of complex subject strings. And those complex strings, it's hard. I kind of lost faith a little bit in that process when I would kind of look at a subject string that I had applied like a week before. I'd be like, who did this heading? And also, if you think about from cataloger to cataloger, applying those really complex headings, and also from institution to institution, applying those really complex headings, you're just not going to get the same level of consistency. So if you kind of keep it more kind of like simpler in terms of subject application, to me, that's a better approach, is to kind of like go for that. So anyway, during migration, when we were migrating from one system to another, we kind of exploded out. We went with this more faceted approach, and we kind of exploded, things into topicals, and then geographics we split off into their own headings, and genre we're using the Getty AAT vocabulary for genre, not fast, but yeah. So that was our approach. This is what it looks like kind of on the back end as we apply headings. So we see that kind of on the bottom right as metadata people, as they start to type, that is calling on the FAST API. It's bringing in those auto suggest kind of features. We would apply that. The URI actually gets applied in the system, and then the label shows up. And this is what it looks like in our facets. So we do have kind of, again, that kind of left align for the geographic. So you can see all of the France things together. Yeah, and we also have that for our subjects as well. So again, all of those subjects are kind of nicely kind of broken apart, and you can combine these. So if you want to do rivers in France, you can kind of combine those however you want, as opposed to just having it in one big long heading. In our catalog at UVic, the current policy, like I mentioned before, is retain if present, and we'd like to move to a faceted approach entirely, or I would at least, but it just takes a little bit of time to get there, I think, and we have to really think through this process. We're not kind of a big library that's going to make that decision and have the resources to throw behind it necessarily. So I think, I'm convinced this is something we should move towards, but probably not in the immediate future. So a couple of different kind of movements have happened in the last couple of years. One of them is the British Library, of course, deciding in 2022 that they're going to stop using LCSH for a lot of their records and start using FAST. If you read one of the articles that I posted was from that issue of Cataloging Classification Quarterly, was from the Library of Congress. And again, they're kind of moving to this post-coordinated approach in a lot of their thinking as well. And I think, again, that kind of leads into this linked data future, where I think we're going to need more of those discrete headings that have those URIs. So I think the idea of faceted vocabularies is gaining momentum, and post-coordination is gaining momentum, and FAST is available, and it's fairly stable, and yeah, it's available to use at this point. And I think that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions if people have any.
Thanks, Dean. It was very interesting. Colleagues, as Dean said, now is your time to ask us questions. Please raise your hands or write it in the chat. And I saw there was one earlier on.
Ingrid, it's Fatima here.
Yes.
Can I sort of comment and ask a question while people are thinking?
Okay, I'm not sure what happened to Fatima. I see there's a hand. Okay, Susan, you go.
This is just a comment. I don't think your average catalog user appreciates the complexity of the Library of Congress subject headings. And so FAST seems to be a different way of approaching it and making it sort of more reachable for the average client. I would like to see that the search engines would at least put things together properly in this post-coordinated way.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with you. And I think, it's just my personal opinion, but I feel like the idea of kind of teaching people that even if there is kind of value in having more pre-coordinated approach and kind of creating these Library of Congress subject headings, I think there is value to that. But I guess the ultimate question is whether there is an appreciation, like you say, or the desire to learn about how to search using that approach by our users. I feel like that kind of environment has passed us by, and so I don't think people are going to learn how to do it, or users are not going to learn how to do it. And I agree with you. We still need robust subject metadata, and it would be great to kind of have a lot of our interfaces that we use kind of surface that kind of effort that we put into a lot of these headings in a lot better way. I know that in our search environment here at the University of Victoria, it's pulling in article data, it's pulling in vendor data, publisher data within our discovery layer, and that's full of kind of middling, not great metadata. And so that's kind of mixing with what I would describe as higher quality metadata that's coming from our local catalog. So trying to leverage or make sure that you create these kind of topical terms or whatever facets you're creating, and creating a listing that's reliable and trustworthy, so that the user actually thinks that they can trust it. I think that is really a big part of this work as well in our interfaces.
Thanks.
Yeah, so there was I think it's more a comment from Anushi, and the comment is that currently records that are imported from OCLC with fast headings to an institution, they delete the fields as it makes the record very cluttered and confusing. And the display on the discovery layer or OPAC will be too long for users to browse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I agree with you. And I think, that's kind of why my ended, it was a bit of a whimper at the end of the presentation, but why I ended with talking about kind of what we haven't done yet. I think it needs to, if you're going to pull the trigger on using FAST, particularly in a library catalog where you have been using LCSH for so long, I think you need to swap it out. That is, I wouldn't want to use both. I think that you might want to just say, here's a day one, instead of LCSH as of this day, we're just going to use FAST. I'll convert all of the LCSH and LCNAF records to FAST. And that's what I'm going to present to the user as of this particular day. Make sure that that's consistent across your entire catalog. And then at that point, I think you do swap it out so that, again, that user doesn't have to filter through, oh, here's an LCSH heading, and then it's also within FAST and it's the exact same heading. So to my mind, at least, it's got to be either or.
Okay. Colleagues, any more questions?
Ingrid, it's Fatima. I hope this time my connection is not going
Trying
to.
again.
Trying again, yes.
Yeah,
Dean, I wanted.
connectivity
Yes,
seems
it's
to
just.
be an issue.
Yes, I keep losing the Wi-Fi connection for some reason. I'm now on hotspotting for my device, so I'm hoping it will help. Dean, you spoke about keyword searching and post coordination. Would you just talk a little bit more about that? What does that mean? How do I phrase it? For the user, what does that mean? What is the benefit of that? And then I think I just wanted to, I don't know about other people, but I learned today for the first time that there's 9 modules, or what is called modules to FAST. I had only thought of it in terms of topical, and I had thought of applying it more to our digital collections rather than also to our catalog. Because for me, that would be a consideration, what Anushka was talking about earlier, that if you use both, it's too much of a problem. And then to swap it out from LC subject headings, the long strings, to FAST would need, one would need to make a decision and then do it. Otherwise, it becomes too complicated and confusing for the users. And so I hadn't really thought about using it in the library catalog. So that was also for me something that was quite new. Do you want to comment on that theme, please?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, the question around keyword search and post coordination, I think to me, that's, I guess whether we can, I believe that it's the default behavior, right? So I think that most kind of interfaces to websites and I guess library and archives and all kinds of subject interfaces to catalogs do start with that kind of, it's got the big search box that we've been told that's what people want. And I think that is kind of borne out in a lot of the data or usability data that I've seen at least. So I think that so that's kind of, I think, has to filter into our data creation approach, and they're not divorced from each other. I think one should inform another. So if we feel like that's the default behavior of our users, I think that the question would be, okay, well, if they're not going to learn how to do this, kind of interpret these big, long LCSH subject strings, like maybe they would have been forced to in the past because we were the only game in town in terms of accessing information. That's no longer the case. So I think that, I think they expect that keyword search, and then I don't want to take too much away from kind of the e-commerce side, but if it's just really more anecdotal, if I'm going to a website, I kind of expect to be able to put in a keyword search, if it's Amazon or whatever, and then I expect to actually filter to particular categories as I kind of go along. And I kind of think that that's more of an online kind of user behavior. Some of it's backed up by data, but I think some of it is a little bit more anecdotal, or it's just a personal feeling that that's the case. So I guess what I want to meet people with, and I already mentioned this a little bit, is that yes, those facets that we're creating, they are trustworthy. And I think the challenge that we have with some of the pre-coordinated approaches is that we end up with these huge long strings in those after the keyword search, and then you're looking at a facet along the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and you're looking at the topics or subjects, and you see these big long strings, and there's only 1 or 2 records associated with it. And so I would rather have kind of simpler terminology within that facet and more records attached to it as well, so that the user can continue to kind of winnow down a little bit. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, the 9 different modules, I would say, we use it as well for our digital collections. And so so we just kind of point people to it and say, this is your subject vocabulary. I mean, it's going, in that case, it's going in Dublin Core subject, and that's kind of in our local application profile. And so, so really those URIs can be dropped in, those terms can be dropped in within a lot of our digital collections kind of metadata schema that we use, it's not quite as specific in oftentimes as MARC is. So I can use, kind of the fast version of a meeting name or a named event or a corporate name or whatever it happens to be. They'd all just go into subject. And so I do think it works well for digital collections. And yeah, using it in a market environment, I think that really is a lot of the kind of discussion around, like how are you going to use FAST within MARC? Because I think it's been catalogers traditionally who have been kind of applying the subject headings more generally and involved in the discussion a lot. But I see, a lot of usage outside of MARC, and I think that's really it's a good fit. I think for FAST is a good fit for a lot of our digital collection metadata.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Dean.
Okay. Any more questions, colleagues? We've had a good discussion this afternoon. Very interesting. I don't see any more hands. Can I give it over to Marsha? That Marsha can take over for the vote of thanks.
Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues. Mine today is just to pass a message of appreciation. On behalf of IGBIS committee, I would like to pass a word of appreciation to you, Dean, for agreeing to share your knowledge and expertise with us. Thank you for breaking down what FAST is all about. It was indeed an honor to have you today. Thank you. To the IGBIS committee under the leadership of Fatima, thank you very much for initiating this session. The Cataloging Code of Ethics Task Team Coordinator, Tini, thank you for giving us an update on the development of the task team. We are really looking forward to the result of the survey. Finally, I would like to thank you, colleagues, for spending this afternoon with us. I hope that you learned a lot today from Dean. And colleagues, I'm going to ask you to switch on your camera so that we can take a photo, but only if you're comfortable in doing so. Apelele, will you assist in taking the picture?
Yes, I will assist.
Sarah, are you still there? If you can also assist Apelele there.
I'll see what I can grab.
Can we say fast?
Fast.
Cameras are still coming on, so we're going to do another one.
Yeah.
We first had to adjust our brille and put our lipstick on and check the hair before we can switch.
I think I took everyone from my side. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you very much, Apelele. In that case, this is the end of our session. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.